Fresh off more live basketball last night, in improbable comeback by LeBron. I'd say LeBron and the Lakers, but it was all LeBron. That was just unbelievable. So we'll touch on that a little bit because I know we spent a lot of time talking about him on Tuesday, and then we got Andre Iguodala coming up here. But because we're doing this probably like once a month now, and there wasn't really an open that I was totally feeling, we have Ceruti with Ceruti quiz time. Just throwing some questions at me. So let's ride.
Yeah, I was excited. We were talking through some of these last night, and we have a good variety of ones. And one that we took, because I think the first time we did this was right before the regular season started, and I was so excited about the 2021 draft, and I want to revisit that again today. I think I want to rank some of the players, but we won't start there. Why don't we start here? Everybody's enamored constantly by our guy Wemby. Just stupid stat lines. His 5x5 game the other night was pretty incredible. Does the only thing is, does the Spurs record and how bad they are, does that influence you in potentially voting him as Defensive Player of the Year in his rookie year?
It wouldn't for me. I imagine it will for others. I don't know how this transition happened where, because the team's record should be a part of the individual's MVP chances, I don't know how that trickled down into the other awards. Like when I hear about it for Rookie of the Year, I just want to, I'd say pull my hair out, but it doesn't matter anymore. It just, like, most of these guys are going to bad teams. And the only example that I can use is like when I'm doing MVP or I'm doing All NBA or I'm doing, let's say specific to the All NBA stuff. There are things I can prioritize, but depending on the pool of players that I'm choosing from or who's available for the first team or who the debate is with the four guys remaining for the two spots on the third team. I think last year it was pretty clear it was like 16 or 17 guys, and then that was it. It was fairly obvious when you're doing the All NBA voting that each year you're only comparing that pool of players. So the criteria can change a little bit. It's a lot like, as I say every single year with the college football playoff selection committee, is you can say, well, wait a minute, 2 years ago they did this. It's like, okay, but 2 years ago, that team's resume was in comparison to those other teams. So because that happened 2 years ago doesn't mean it's going to happen this year. And that's something that I think is a bit of a moving target. It can seem like it's a contradiction, but it isn't really that. At least that's how I feel about it. Now, specific to Wembanyama, you already heard my answer that it wouldn't. I don't know that it should. I'm sure Minnesota would be like, look, we're the 1 seed. It's Gobert. I think Jaden McDaniels deserves some love with this. Jonathan Isaac doesn't play enough, but he's that kind of player. Hartenstein has some really nice numbers. But when I've watched Wembanyama in these games, and whether it's leading the league in blocks, I think he's 13th now in steals. There's a lot of stuff where he's top 10 on some of the adjusted stuff because the rest of his team doesn't play any defense. Like, he's one of only 3 players that I think are a net positive defensively. And I'm shocked the other 2 guys are even that. And that's probably because they're in the rotation with him as much as they are. So I'm leaning that way with still some work to do. And it's a hard vote because there are numbers that will exist where I felt like the Brook Lopez year where people were flirting with that. And then you kind of realize that, yeah, but his responsibility is this while he has Drew and Giannis and all these other guys roaming around playing great defense all over the place. So like Brook's job is just a little bit easier. So defensive player of the year, like that seems crazy. So I would look at the Spurs record and just shrug and feel confident that it's not just the stats for Wembanyama. It's just the impact, the way he gets everyone that's getting near the rim to think twice about what they're wanting to do. And on top of everything, I think they're recovering 67% of his block shots, which is like a staggering number in itself. So I'm sure other voters will go, oh, I'd give it to him, but the team isn't good. And I personally would feel like that's unfair.
Thanks for mentioning my guy, J.I. I had a heart attack the other night when he went down, but it seems to be everything's fine. He might even play tonight against Utah, so that'd be great. I have one last thing on this, like side note. He's going to get a quadruple double, right, at some point in his career. Like he's going to.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's some Hakeem type stuff in his future. You know, what was funny is I was thinking about him today as we were getting ready for this, and I thought, if 1998 would Wembanyama go like 7th? Like would basketball people watch him internationally? Like say have the same kind of games that he was having before he was picked number 1, but in 98 would he go? They're like, all right, we'll take Rafe LaFrance, and then like Wembanyama's still on the board, because Dirk went 9th in 98. You could argue, wait a minute, Sean Bradley went 2nd in 1993 to Philadelphia, but he'd been in high school in Utah. I know he was born in Germany. I just wonder if there'd be scouts being like, I don't know, the French had to bail him out twice, conveniently forgetting what they did for us in the late 1700s. You grow up in
True.
school and you're
Very
like,
true.
wait, those guys had our backs. I don't know that Yorktown goes our
remember
way.
the Statue of Liberty? All right.
Yeah,
What's up?
right. Yeah. Sorry about those repayments, dude. We're gonna send this old guy BF over. Try to work that out with you.
Who goes first?
I don't know about
who goes
Kurt
first
Russell,
in the draft?
or excuse me, Kurt Russell, Michael Douglas, Ben Franklin. Quick thoughts. All right. Anyway, keep it moving. What did you say?
No, I say who goes first in a draft in 2003? Tyson Chandler or or Wemby? I think Tyson Chandler. They'd be like, oh yeah, body size, yeah, traditional center. We know what he
Culture.
is. It's just so funny.
He's
Eddie
not
Curry
French.
probably goes ahead of him. Not French. Yeah. That's huge.
Not
true.
French.
Very true.
There's just a scout in the back who he's like, I remember in Marquette in '68. He's like, no way, can't take this guy. All right.
Last triple double, by the way, was 1994. David Robinson.
Quadruple
double. Yeah, quadruple double. 1994. David Robinson. So he'd be, I guess the next Spur, but actually the next guy in the NBA to do it.
Yeah.
All right, next one.
Speaking of the military, yeah. What do you got?
LeBron, obviously ridiculous last night. The game was awesome. You were there too, by the way. And you left early.
Left early. Yeah.
Nice. Right. Perfect. What kind of contract would you give LeBron?
By the way, not even remotely impacted by leaving early. When I left the Mo Vaughn game in '98 early, I was fucked up for a year on that one. This one didn't care. Had to get food. Had to get to work. Had to catch up on some other things. Okay, so LeBron's contract. Windhorst had a pretty significant quote saying that LeBron, quote, looking for a 9-figure deal. So here are the facts. LeBron's got a player option for $51.4 million. And the facts are, like, every time you think like, oh, now he's slowing down. Like, LeBron still hasn't had that stretch where he misses like the 20 plus games, which he usually has done the last few years, which I think can kind of be overlooked a little bit. So player option for $51.4 million. If it's a 9-figure deal, I asked a cap guy this morning the structure of what a 3-year deal would look like for LeBron. And it would be about 3 years, 162. So you're figuring like 49 in the first year, just touching maybe 60 million in the third year. And he'll be 40. You're paying him at 40, 41, and 42. Last night was awesome. No thanks. There's no way I'm doing that, despite him, whatever you want to talk about with like explorers in ancient times being like, all right, this is it. We got it. We charted all of it. Cartographers are good. And then LeBron's like, no, we're going to keep going. We're just going to keep what's over there. I don't know. No one's ever gone over there before. That's what he's doing. He's hooking the dogs up to the sled, being like, nope, there's still places we can go. And no one around him can believe it. So he deserves all the credit for doing this stuff and moving the needle of what we even think is possible. I should say moving the line of what we think is possible. But a 9-figure deal for him, I would be like, okay, well then go get it. Because if you look at the teams with cap space, and this is practical cap space, things can change, but the way it's listed as of this morning, if you go around and look for it all, Detroit has the most, Philly has the second most, Orlando has the third most, Charlotte the fourth most, and Utah the fifth most. And again, those things could change. I think you could rule out Detroit, Charlotte, and Utah out of the jump. I know this is going to hurt Ceruti, but you might not even care. I don't think Orlando would do it, although they probably need to spend their cap space this year and then figure out.
That's the rumor. Clay Thompson.
Okay. The 76ers one, remember when we did that years ago before he went to LA? And it was like, he might actually just go there. He didn't even actually show up to the meeting. That's how bad he wanted to be in Philadelphia. So they did a really good job of selling that as a potential landing spot as leverage against LA and potentially staying in Cleveland for one more year. So as great as this has been, I just don't know that I would do it. Well, I would tell you right now, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be like, hey man, here's 3 years and another 100. We're talking 162. So here's the thing we need to remember though. Kobe Bryant, back in November of 2013, he was hurt. He played 6 games that season, and the Lakers knew he was going to be a free agent that summer. They gave him a 2-year extension for $48.5 million. Well, now $48.5 million doesn't even sound like anything. But at the time, okay, more than 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago. At the time, we couldn't believe it. We're like, what are they doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And that was going to be paying him in his 36-year-old and 37-year-old season. And that was the end of his contract. And technically, actually, was a pay cut from the $30 million that he'd made in the 13-14 season. So the push at the time, even though no one understood it and everybody thought it was bad, and ultimately it didn't really matter, there was also an element of like, well, Kobe's going to want this so bad. They're going to have to, now they've paid him, they're going to have to do everything they can win a title. It's like, man, people can want a lot of stuff. It doesn't mean you get it. The same way LeBron wants one more, doesn't mean you're just going to, most of the endings are all bad endings. But there was a Lakers thing, okay, that was about the Lakers and Jeannie Buss and their ownership being specifically tuned to stars. And that taking care of Kobe proved to other stars, if you come here, we take care of you. So will it be the same motivating factor to give LeBron a 3-year deal in a way that a lot of us are going to go? That still doesn't make any sense, despite how amazing he was last night. So that's a factor that we should remind ourselves of, because that was what they sold us on the Kobe deal that didn't make any sense. Again, don't come back at me with the numbers on the 48. Whatever. At that time, go back and read everything. Most people are like, are you kidding? Like, why would you do that? They did it, and there you go. So, next one.
All right, we're getting a little glimpse early of what life post Trae Young might be like in Atlanta. Finger surgery out at least a month. So we're getting the DeJounte Murray show here.
I thought he had a kidney transplant after those pictures. I was like, what is going on? Is he all right?
Not a good look. Not a good look. But hey, man, surgery's surgery. You know, I guess cut him some slack. But it does look like we're moving towards some sort of thing where something has to happen this summer, right? I think everybody thought, you know, hey, you bring in Quinn Snyder, he's going to maybe get the best out of these guys. It's been disappointing this year again. And, you know, there's been rumors about Trae being traded. DeJounte, who knows? He doesn't seem very happy. What would you, if you had to trade one this summer, what are you doing?
Okay, I'll admit that I've had moments where I've watched and thought, would they just be better with DeJounte and then using whatever resources, you know, around him that they would get back in a Trae Young trade? And I know, look, my history is well established with Trae Young. But look, I watch all these teams and wonder, hey, what if they did this or what if they did that? And most of the time, like, the teams just aren't going to do it. You know, some of these younger picks, like I know we're going to talk about the Houston guys in a second here. And it's like, well, wonder what Houston could get for Jalen Green. And I think the fear is like, you just still don't really trade those guys because you took them so high and you're just afraid they're going to figure it out somewhere else. So it's going to be even worse for you, right? So Trae is so popular, and I don't know if it's a social media thing that comes at me specifically so much where it feels like everybody loves him, but that's a bad indicator of what the reality is. So when I watch, I wonder. But here's the thing: is Trae's just a lot better than DeJounte. DeJounte just hasn't been as good in Atlanta as he was in San Antonio. And going through all the on-off stuff, which you can find stuff that's misleading. It depends on rotations. Maybe DeJounte's with the backups too much. It was they split. They try to stagger these guys as much as they can, even though it feels like they're playing more together than they first did. But there's just no number that tells you they're better with Murray than they are with Trae. You know, it's I looked for all of them. And it was a bit of an eye test thing where I'm like, yeah, I think the eyes could be lying to you a little bit. The problem is we're 3 coaches in. The defense has always been a disaster. If you go back to, well, they're 27th on D this year. Last year, 22nd. 22, they were 26th. In 2021, they were 18th. In 2020, they were 28th. And in 19, they were 28th. So they've won one playoff. They had one successful playoff run where they won 2 series and then lost to the Eastern Conference Finals of the Bucks. So that gets thrown back. But look, I've said it for years. There's a lot of teams that have this conference finals run out of nowhere, and it just happens, and it's not really who you are. And I think that's proven out again. And I've constantly said how much I like the talent here. So DeJounte's got a better contract, but Trae's still under contract. But, you know, man, I was looking at some of the DeJounte stuff. His overall numbers, and maybe that's playing with Trae, but, I mean, he was a different cat when he was with the Spurs. And now he's just kind of slightly above average. And so it might even be about, hey, maybe DeJounte's just not as good as everybody thought he was. And this is an ownership that wanted to do this deal. And I don't think the front office wanted to do the deal and move all the picks for DeJounte here. So these trades, and I know what people have reported after the deadline, that other teams were saying to reporters that it felt like they'd be a little bit more open to it. It feels a little like the Westbrook stuff, the speculation that, okay, if Westbrook's on his way out from, say, Oklahoma City or Houston or whatever, maybe a team that's really, really stale brings in a guy, has the presser, gives him the jersey, probably makes a couple all-star teams, sells a few more tickets, and it's like, hey, at least we kind of have a star and attraction. Well, Atlanta already has that, obviously, with Trae, and it's super important to it. And I just don't think that Murray's good enough for you to make that kind of decision. So yeah, I maybe that surprises me, people here, a little bit, but I've asked myself while I've watched it, going, would they actually be a little better off considering what they might get back for Trae and just trying to build that back up on the fly? I would just wonder why is DeJounte just significantly worse with Atlanta than he was with San Antonio?
Yeah, I feel like, I've been a critic of Trae Young's, but I still think like their ceiling is higher with Trae than it is DeJounte, I think, running the team. And I think, you just say, hey, could we get more for Trae Young on the open market? Probably still. There have been like a lot of Lakers rumors, and the only things that we talked about for a while is like how much of a fit he is in Atlanta. Like it just kind of makes sense there. And, the fans seem to like him and defend him, and I do like that about them, even though I don't love the player as much. But
I don't know, though. I don't know if it's true in the case, because I just only see the stuff on social media, and it's pretty nasty because of the way I've talked about it for such a long time. But yeah, on social media, that's their guy. So, I don't know if that's like every Atlanta Hawks fan. I don't know what the actual representation would be of, no way, figure it out with Trae and build around it, build it the right way. But I don't, or if there's a lot of people who are like, all right, you've tried this for multiple years, what's different? But DeJounte doesn't seem to be the solution to it. And when you do a deeper dive in the numbers, you're almost like, whoa. Unless you want to go even further and say, well, that's because he's playing next to Trae and he has to like have all these overlapping minutes that don't work out for him. All of it's on the table. But as far as player versus player, he's not as good as Trae. I mean,
all right. Speaking of problems, let's do the battle of the maligned former top 3 picks. And this might be a little unfair because Scoot's in here and he hasn't even played a full season yet. But I want you to rank these 3 guys going forward: Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, and Scoot Henderson.
I just can't do this with Scoot. You keep trying to do this to me, so I think it's unfair. Talk to me next April. Not this April. Talk to me next April. I did think he was figuring some stuff out before the abductor issue. He's got a really high usage. The stats, the metrics for him are so bad, you got to cover your kid's eyes. Like you have to put a parent filter on Basketball Reference when you look up Scoot Henderson's advanced stuff because it's so bad. So I don't even know how Scoot factors into this, but the Jalen Green stuff is really alarming. The numbers are alarming, and his play, when you watch it, is alarming because you're like, what is he? Because it is best. You're like, I can't believe he just did that. He's on a short list of guys who did whatever he just did with the ball and his movement, and it's incredible. But the three-point shooting has been down 3 straight years. I look a lot of players and look at that sophomore year for the high picks, where it's like, okay, you play your rookie year, some decent numbers because you get the opportunity, and then the second year they let you just go wild and give you all these minutes, all these shots. I mean, he took 1 million shots last year. He scored 22 a game, and it's like, man, he's really coming along. It's like, no, he's really actually just taking more shots because no one's in the way. And it was only him and Kevin Porter Jr. just kind of doing whatever the fuck they wanted to do the whole time. And I think that's why they spent so much money on Van Vliet and Brooks, to be like, we need to figure out, like, Brooks is a better player than Jalen Green is. He is. And I know that sucks to hear because you didn't take Dylan Brooks so high, but I'm really worried about Jalen Green. Although his defense, I think, has improved from absolutely abysmal. Jabari on the other side, the 3-point shooting's gone from 31 to 36%. Like to see him get to the free throw line a little bit more. The 9 rebounds are better. His numbers are just better. And I think he's always going to be able to play defense. Who he is right now, I can already see, even though that'd be a disappointment. You'd be like, that guy's going to stick around for a long time. I don't know what team would say, hey, Jalen Green, here are your 18 shots per game. We think you're awesome. Here's your new contract. Like, that's scarier. So even if the ceiling athletically with moments with Green are more amazing to watch, like, even the worst version of Jabari, I think, plays in the league a long time and fits in. The problem is that's not what you're doing when you're drafting Jabari as high as you are. You're hoping that he can get his own buckets. And the biggest knock on him when you're doing a draft tape of him is that, man, he's just not initiating a lot of this stuff on his own, despite the shooting, despite how smart he seems defensively and his positioning. I also think it kind of sucked for him to have to watch those guards last year, just be like, hey, am I ever going to get the ball? But I worry when dudes who are supposed to be perimeter players don't really get to dribble in games all that often, because until you get comfortable dribbling through traffic and people trying to stop you and all that kind of stuff, you can start to turn into a guy that doesn't want to dribble in an NBA game. And once that happens, it completely limits who you can be as an offensive player. So it's kind of a carryover to what the college tape showed on him, but I still feel better about him than I would Jalen Green.
All right, speaking of Jalen Green, let's revisit my favorite draft class that I could remember, and that is the 2021 draft class, which is just stacked. But I still think, depending on the week or the month, the order of like how you'd rank these guys is always different. So how would you rank the players in the 2021 draft right now? Because, I mean, you've got Cade, you've got Franz, you've got Scotty, you've got Mobley. Like, you get all these guys, and they just move and shift. And depending on, like I said, I think Cade's kind of having like a little statistically, like I've seen people comparing his season to Paulo's and being like, the numbers are kind of the same. Why are we so down on Cade? And I still actually like Cade a lot, but I don't know that he'd go on in a redraft. So, and obviously Franz is my guy. Scotty made the All-Star team. Mobley's been up and down, kind of more maybe down now since the offensive game hasn't gotten there. But I'm interested to know how you would rank those guys right now.
Yeah, so I wonder even if you could argue, should Alpi Şengün, staying with the Rockets here, could he go number one in all of this? I don't think it's a crazy question. It might be more of a matter of, what kind of position do we prioritize in this game now? And that's where like Mobley gets hurt. So I'd still go Cade number one. I would.
Me too, actually, yeah.
You want to talk ugly numbers? Like if you look at some of the advanced stuff for him the first couple of years, like it was gross. There's no question he's a much better player. He was great in February too, but look, he's 46 and 36% shooting now, which is a big improvement. Like I said, the first two years are just really bad. And I'm not just chalking this up to like a great February where they have like one win to show for a couple battles the last week. But I'm still a Cade fan, and I'd still take him number one. I think Scotty's still really good. You want to talk about the eyes lying to you a little bit, and definitely that Oklahoma City Thunder game, the overtime one where Toronto was battling, and I felt like Barnes got stuck watching, and some people just wanted to say that he was tired the whole time. But how about this number? Because I looked it up. His usage rate before Quickly and RJ got there. Now, granted, like Siakam's taking some of those possessions too. His usage rate was 24. After Quickly, who looks like is initiating a ton of the offense, and RJ's getting his thing going, and it looks like Scotty's watching a little bit more, the usage is the same. So it may look different, but he's not now dropping off on touches and opportunities and some of the stats that he's making for himself and his teammates. So, again, the eyes lie to you a little bit on that one. So then it kind of comes down to like, look, I'd still take Franz over Kuminga, even though I'm worried about the three-point shooting from Franz, but it's just sort of weird this year that he's 31% after 35, 36 the first 2 years. Kuminga's certainly taken a jump. His February shooting numbers are better than his January shooting numbers were incredible. Better than his February numbers. But look, he shot 37% from three last year, which is, I think, surprising when you think about the Kuminga package. But it looks like, okay, at least with Kuminga, may not be a star, but like this guy can impact some games with his energy, his athleticism, and he just seems to finally be figuring some of this stuff out. But I think I'd still lean Franz on him. The Mobley question, I think, is the biggest one here. I watched him in the Dallas game where Strus hit the ridiculous three at the buzzer. They didn't close with Mobley in the last rotation. They brought him in at a defensive substitution, but for the most part, he was not a part of whatever the closing last minutes, and I'd have to go back and like look and see when he's being subbed out. Since he's come back, let's just put it this way, 14 games since January 1st, and he's 11th in fourth quarter minutes on the Cavs. And sometimes that can be weird because it's like one guy played and then he counts in the minutes ranking for the fourth quarter. But I think the lowest number of games played that came up sorting it that way was like 8 or 9 games for one of the other guys in the Cavs. So that's something to look at. I mean, look, Mobley's still a very valuable player on a lot of different teams, but there are moments where you're like, okay, the redraft already, Mobley's the guy that goes one, but the offense is not developed. And that substitution thing, again, I'm not watching every Cavs game, but noticing that against Dallas would be something I'll keep looking at. And maybe it turns around there a little bit. But I'm still okay with Cade at one. I think there'd be an argument for Barnes. The fact that Şengün is even in the conversation is incredible here. But, there's 3 or 4 guys at the top of that draft. And right now, I think we're worried about 2 of them.
I have a theory on Mobley that I think I've run by you before, but I'll do it here. So Bill, for the longest time, has liked to rag on me about like, oh, the Magic, like, why they're not making any trades? They need to bring in a guy. Like, go for it now. Go for it now. Why did you trade for Donovan Mitchell? Why didn't you try to make a deal at the trade deadline? And partially my answer is because like I'm just cool kind of seeing how all these young guys develop, specifically Paolo and Franz. And I think the Cavs, when they made that Donovan Mitchell trade, and they kind of became in like win now mode really early instead of maybe letting Mobley develop a little bit more offensively. Like they just don't need him to be that much on offense. And so he's incredible defensively. And obviously he's got Allen next to him to kind of help out there too. But he hasn't, I think they like, I'm not saying you'd redo that decision because all right, you get Donovan Mitchell. He's one of the better players in the league. But I wonder if like he had gotten more runtime on like a worse team, if he'd be able to like figure it out a little bit more offensively. Whereas now like he's just had to kind of plug and play into a team that's trying to compete in the East right now.
It's a fair question. I think it's totally okay for Mobley to develop some stuff that he feels more confident with offensively and the limited touches that he would get as opposed to more touches without Mitchell. And I don't blame Cleveland for trading for Mitchell. Like people wait around for these teams like, oh man, is Mitchell really that guy? I'd be like, no, that's cool. Go ahead, Cleveland. Wait around for the top 5 player that becomes available that you can go ahead and trade for, instead of a top 15 guy, which is where Mitchell, look at worse, he's top 20. Some years he feels like he's even better than top 15. So would he get in the way of Paolo and Franz and all these other things? And like to Bill's point, is Cleveland trading him? I know he gets pissed about nobody trading anybody, but like was Cleveland like, yeah, let's just pull the plug.
Yeah.
We lost to the Knicks last year. Let's just trade him. We'll just trade him.
Damn. Yep.
We gave it 16 months, but it just wasn't going to work out. So I think that's a fair point. But look, it's also a little bit on Mobley. Like figure out something that you feel good with. And this might be something we touched on last year. Perhaps the Twin Towers of Cleveland are outdated in playoff basketball for 2024. I don't have a conclusion to it yet because it was only one playoff series, but it's kind of crazy that, and this is the way draft works. It's just a good reminder for every single draft. Like, hey, this guy can be an all-star. And this guy is like pick 8. And you're like, this guy could be an all-star. It's like, you know what? Like 5 of these guys are going to be on different teams within 4 years.
Yeah. All right. Last one. Obviously, Boston would be the most disappointing team if they didn't win a title this year. Who's number 2?
Good question, because the first answer for most disappointing, I don't even know. Like, the conversation starts after Boston, right? I think it's the Clippers. You can't have the drought Denver has with a title win one and then be like, oh, we didn't repeat. That's not happening. Minnesota, maybe next year would be in it. Oklahoma City, too young, not going to worry about it. I guess Phoenix could be part of it too. Maybe Milwaukee a little bit here or there, but I think it's the Clippers. I really think it's the Clippers. You paid Kawhi. You're probably going to pay Paul George. You're probably going to pay Harden. You're keeping this thing together. And as great as it looked over the 25-6 stretch, last night was a little alarming. These small lineups, Ty Lue, like were, back in the day, the Warriors, when they would fix a game, be like, all right, death lineup, go small. And it was horrifying for teams that weren't ready for it. Although, this is just how great these guys are at doing their jobs, is eventually people kind of caught up and figured out some stuff. Lou does it now like it's just going to fix everything, and it doesn't. So I'm not going to take away from them from the 2 months because that was incredible. The Boston tape exists, but them not winning with these resources into these 3 guys at a later stage and the injury history, I think it'd be number 2. I don't really know who else I would think of. Maybe it'd be Phoenix. But do you have a better number 2?
Are you just saying like Denver won it last year, so like they're just kind of playing with house money right now? Because I think they still have, I think we could argue playoff time, like the best team in the league. Like I know what the regular season stats say for the Celtics, but
yeah,
Denver,
that's fair.
Like that might be, because
I'm talking about like, what are we doing here? Like Denver's not going to
rethink our whole process kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair because it's definitely not Denver then. Yeah, if anything, maybe it is Phoenix too, because it's not Minnesota, it's not the Thunder. I'm just looking at the top of the rankings. Cavs, no. Bucks, or what? Maybe I don't know. The Bucks. It's probably not the Bucks. And then then you get to the Suns. So yeah, you're probably right with the Clippers.
Yeah, Bucks maybe a little bit higher, bringing it over Dame. And like if they were to flame out, get torched, if they keep getting, some of the defensive numbers are getting a little bit better, but we'll see what happens in the playoffs there.